Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today's episode is all about a beautiful intergenerational relationship with a 105-year-old friend. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle with over 2 million downloads and counting. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your master certified coach, life leadership mentor, and certified Zentangle teacher. And I am so happy to be here with you again. Now, you are in the right place if you're a woman over 50 who's starting to feel time differently. And you want to stop coasting through life. I get it. Each episode helps you notice what's really going on in your life, recognize the moments that matter, and begin choosing your next chapter more intentionally. Now, today's interview is such a good one. It's about two women who walk and talk together on the regular. But their relationship is a little different because there's about a 30-year difference in their age, and the older of the two is 105. The other thing is that they don't keep things superficial on these walk and talk dates. They go deep and talk about aging and the reality of getting older. As you can imagine, they cover a lot of important territory. But just quick, before we dive in, I have an invitation for you. If you've been thinking about getting older yourself and you're not quite sure what you want in your next chapter, this will help. You are invited to take my free Next Chapter Midlife quiz to discover if your next chapter is trying to get your attention. You'll understand what may be quietly holding you back, see what your next chapter is asking for, and get personalized insight in under 90 seconds. It's fast and it's fascinating. You can start the quiz here at www.midlifequiz.com. Okay, now let's dive in. My guest today is Merilyn Simonds. She's the younger half of this intergenerational friendship that I mentioned earlier. In today's interview, you'll hear all about the unique and I think powerful relationship between two women, 76 and 105 years old, that got better with age. Walking and talking with your 100-plus-year-old friend is not something you might think was even possible, but it's their reality, and my guest wrote a book about it. Now, Merilyn is also an internationally published and award-winning author of 3 e-born works of fiction and 20 books overall. Today, we're talking about one of her recent books, Walking with Beth, Conversations with My 100-Year-Old Friend, which was published in September 2025, and it became an instant bestseller. This book feels like you're almost there with these two friends as they're walking and talking. In the nutshell, they talk about aging, including the scary parts of growing older. They share their wisdom, passions, and their unique perspective about all of it. I mean, really, how often do you get this kind of insight from a centenarian who's 105 and her amazing friend? I know you're going to love this interview. Hi, Merilyn. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Women in the Middle podcast.
Oh, hi, Susie. I'm very, very pleased to be here.
I am so happy you're here too. And, you know, I pride myself on finding guests in unusual ways. Now, sometimes it's on CNN. I hear somebody I need to speak to. One time it was on International House Hunters, and I thought, oh, I need to find that person. Now, with you, it wasn't that unusual, but it was on the radio. I heard you on CBC in Canada, and I thought, oh, what a story. I must get to know Merilyn. So thank you so much for hopping on. It's just so great. Your story is so special.
Well, you know, that documentary that CBC did, many media wanted to talk to Beth, but, you know, she's 105. So I limited the access to her. And when CBC proposed doing a documentary, I was so thrilled. And I was so happy with how that turned out. There's a link to it on my website, MerilynSimonds.com. And it's just, you know, Beth is at her best. She's being Beth, absolute Beth. And the maker of the documentary, Alison Maisman, she talked to me. We went to visit all the places that Beth and I used to walk. And it's really, you know, I would recommend it to everyone, and it's going to be available for a long, long time, which is another thing that makes me happy.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, let's get started then. Just tell us a little bit about you and what was going on that brought you and Beth together in this most special way.
Well, Beth and I had been friends for probably 30 years. Occasional friends. We would bump into each other at literary events in Kingston, where we both live, Kingston, Ontario. And when I turned 70, I've never been bothered by birthdays at all. I don't notice them, the big 30, the big 50, the big 60. I didn't even notice them. But 70 was different. My mother died when she was 75, and 70 felt like moving into a new territory. And I thought, well, who can I talk to about this? And Beth is exactly 30 years older than I am, almost exactly. And so I thought, well, she's been through this. Why don't I give her a call? And so I said, Beth, can we get together? I want to talk to you about this. And she said, well, it's COVID. We can go for a walk. And so this was the first year of COVID when we were all isolating. And so Beth and I went for a walk, and we had such a good time. We just talked nonstop for an hour. We talked about everything. And there's something about walking side by side with someone. It's like driving in a car or doing dishes. You can say things that you can't say kind of face to face. And we just talked about everything under the sun, as well as, what does 70 look like? What comes after 70? That sort of thing. And at the end of it, she said, wow, I think we should do this again. And so Wednesdays have become our day still. It's been 5 years since we started doing that weekly thing. And so when I'm in Mexico here, we talk every Wednesday afternoon. And when I'm back in Kingston, we walk as long as the weather is amenable. And of course, this year it's not at all.
No, it's terrible. But Merilyn, you just kind of not glossed over, but, you reached out to her when you were 70, which means she was 100.
Yep.
And she's the one who suggested walking regularly. So just that alone, most of us don't even know anybody who's 100.
I know.
And we don't expect them to be physically active.
No. Beth is a miracle, really, and she's just the most amazing model for me, certainly. So she exercises every day. She has all her life. She was an occupational therapist and then an art therapist. So she knows how to stimulate herself, make her mentally and physically. She knows the value of staying active. And so, she's 105 now. Physical issues are accumulating, shall we say. And we don't walk as much. We more often have tea. But she still answers the phone every week with, I am so fortunate. And she believes that. She feels it. She feels it even though, her lungs don't work very well, her arms don't work, her legs don't work, her heart isn't that so good. But she still feels like an incredibly fortunate human being because she has her art, she has friends, she has family, she has people who care about her, people she cares about.
It's amazing. What kind of art does she do?
Well, I guess it's art from the heart. It's at the moment she's doing collage. I brought her back some Japanese papers from Vancouver, and she tears the papers. So it's a very hand activity. She doesn't cut them. She tears the paper, sees shapes, puts the shapes together as collages. They're absolutely stunning.
Wow.
And when we first started together, what's mentioned in the book is, so this was COVID. She was isolated. Isolation was, I think, hardest on the elderly and on the very young, right?
Yeah.
And she, she was used to going out for walks. She was used to having all kinds of people coming to the house, and she's very social. but with COVID, she couldn't. And so she started heaping art materials on her dining room table. And she has one of those really big, old-fashioned seats 10 dining room tables that belonged to her parents. And so the first times when we finally went inside her house for tea, which was after we'd been walking for a few months, the table was heaped with all these things, stones and twigs and cut pieces of wood, little squares of wood and embroidery thread and papers, colored papers, and I mean just everything you can imagine that you might accumulate. And she was making these three-dimensional collages with it. One that I remember in particular was so amazing. It was on a piece of black paper, and little thin twigs were kind of organized in like parentheses. And then in the middle of the parentheses was this white round stone, like a full moon rising over a forest. It was absolutely beautiful. And what she would do is she would take that and put it on the table beside her usual chair where she sits to read and, be close to it for a while. And then she would photograph it and dismantle it and put all the pieces back and do something else.
Oh my God.
So she has hundreds of photographs of collages in her phone. But it's ephemeral art. I mean, most of what she does is ephemeral. One of the things she gave me was, when I was leaving one time, she gave me an envelope that had a photograph in it, a colored photograph, and several dozen pieces of images cut up. And she said, okay, what you do is you lay down that photograph on a table near you where you pass it all the time, and just strew the pieces on top. And every time you go by, just with your fingers, move the pieces around. So it's an ephemeral, ever-changing collage.
Oh my gosh. That's so great. She must not have a cat.
No.
A cat would knock that stuff off for sure.
I would fear for her with a cat. Cats get tangled in your feet after a certain age.
Oh my goodness. Oh my God. So funny. So I was really taken with what you said about anticipating that 70th birthday. And you recognized that it was different. And, I deal a lot with people turning 50 and turning 60. And I'm thinking back to also when I had my 40th and 50th and 60th birthdays, and they were very different. And it kind of surprised me. My 40th, I remember reflecting, I feel pretty good about this. I'm very content, very happy where I am professionally and personally. Yeah. And then 50 was definitely more jarring. Yeah. I didn't freak out or anything, but I definitely was like, I better get a little more serious about some of the things I want to experience and some of the things I want to do. And then 60th, I felt a little bit more fearful of health. That was kind of...
Yeah, because you need to be.
Yeah, and it was definitely there, and it wasn't there in the same way before. And I was to the point where I had my husband had been complaining for years, after I complained for years about him snoring. So finally I was open when my physician said, I think you need a sleep study. So I was open to it, and I'm a proud CPAP wearer and everything now. But you're right, it felt very different. I think it's so important that you noticed that you needed a little more support about that really significant and jarring transitional point in your life.
Well, and as it turned out, I loved my 50s, and I had tremendous energy in my 60s. And I was very healthy. And then 70 hit. And this was after I met Beth. Really, I'm now 76. And those 6 years have been one health crisis after another. And it's, you have to, I mean, they were nothing terminal, I mean, I broke my back, 2-year recovery. It's fine. But they require incredible strength of body and mind. And coming into the 70s, also, the other thing is that your friends are dying. You know, we lose 2, 3, 4, 5 friends a year. And it's just the nature of the age. And you do need some preparation, I think. I didn't consciously look for preparation, but I'm so glad that I became closer to Beth and we had those walks, because a lot of what we talked about gave me strength to deal with the various things that befall a lot of people in their 70s. And if you sail through the 70s, don't don't get too cocky about it, because it's going to hit you in your 80s, right? I mean, the thing is, our bodies wear down. There's just no way around that, and our bad habits also catch up with us. So there you go.
Yeah, they really do. So as you started your walking habit practice appointment,
Yes.
Playtime. Exactly. Did you arrive knowing what you wanted to talk about, or was it just really free flowing and there was always something meaningful to talk about?
Well, at one point I had another friend who stayed with me here in San Miguel, Mexico, where I am right now, for a month, and we had an open notebook on the kitchen table, and anybody who thought of something they really wanted to talk to with the other person, they'd write it down. And so every evening we look at the notebook and choose a topic. And so Beth and I are sort of very organized people, both of us, and we kind of thought we would do that, right? And so we talked about doing that, and we did it once, and then we just let it drop, because although we might start someplace, like talking about children, it would just go all over the place, and who knew where we would end up. So we abandoned that pretty quickly. And we have not yet, after 5 years of weekly meetings, run out of things to say.
I'm just thinking right now, I was with women this weekend that I didn't know all of them this week when I hosted a retreat. Right. And I had so many stories to tell, and I was actually told that I'm the perfect seatmate when driving along. We had a 5-hour drive, because I really do have a lot of stories. And I think I've gotten better at remembering the past because of the podcast, because I'm always prompting myself and mining my brain for stories and analogies and examples. And I realized I did have a lot of stories. Now I'm thinking about Beth, who's 105 now. Like that's a lot of stories.
Yes, it's a lot of stories.
3 more years than me of stories, And it sounds like she has no trouble recalling them.
No, she has a really good memory. I mean, I think a lot of that is, quite frankly, genetic. Her parents didn't live to terribly old ages, but she's a very strong person, and she has a terrific mind. I mean, she has as acute a mind as I do now, or as I did 20 years ago, honestly. Wow. And she has an excellent memory, and she has lots and lots and lots of stories. But I do think, one of the things they say about aging, that the researchers say, is how important social interaction is. Yes. And I think a big part of social interaction is storytelling. It's what we do when we get together, right? We tell stories about what has happened, what you want to happen. And so I think that lubricates the memory in a really good way. Yeah.
And it's also, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people that I talk to when I'm just getting to know them, they're very concerned, because they think they don't have a passion. They think that nothing's interesting has happened yet, or they just don't have clarity on next steps and future and what they really want, so they don't have regrets. And I think so much of it has to do with how you think about your life and your contribution, as well as just being able to remember stuff, which is hard.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, my mother had Alzheimer's, so some people have physical degenerations that there's nothing you can do about. But I mean, you mentioned the word passion, and this is, one of Beth's favorite words. She believes that passions are the key. And one of her goals with this book was to talk to people moving out of the working world and into the world where they had to organize their own life and they had to find their own means of stimulation. There wasn't going to be anybody saying, good job, right? They had to say that to themselves. And, passions are a funny thing. Like, one of my passions is cooking. And I just started making bread again. And when I was really sick, and, it talks about it in the book, I had giant cell arteritis, which kind of took my brain and everything else for a year and a half, 2 years. But I started baking bread again. And the satisfaction of kneading bread is just huge for me. Like that, it almost feels like caressing a baby, the fully risen bread has a silkiness to it, like baby's skin. I can't quite explain it, and I probably am not doing a good job of it, but it doesn't matter what your passion is. Your passion can be sweeping the floor. I mean, it doesn't have to be some big artistic thing. And I think in our culture, we're very production oriented.
Yes.
And end result oriented and fame oriented. And if you're going to write a memoir, you've got to publish it and you've got to get famous for it and sell 1 million copies. Well, no, you can write a little memoir, something happened in your life, and post it online or get the local printer to print it, as Beth does, 100 copies for her family and friends, and mail it out to them. And that can be hugely satisfying.
You're right. Like, one of the questions I always ask clients is, what did you love as a kid? Tell me about happiness in your childhood. What was joyful? What were you always doing or always looking at or reading about or watching a show about or whatever? And you're right. It doesn't need to be big and fancy. It doesn't need to be very expensive and time consuming. It can just be what you love.
Yeah.
And when I ask about childhood, it's pretty easy for people to come up with something, but they would have dismissed it if it had to be defined by their definition of passion. Then it was, just
That's
out of
right.
reach. You have to wait for everything to slow down. You have to wait for your to-do list to be all checked off. You need to wait for retirement. It's so not helpful to think like that.
It's not. And most things that you're passionate about, you can do in a small way and they will grow. Passionate about gardening, passionate about shopping, about shoes. I mean, it doesn't, honestly, I've heard from so many people who have so many unlikely passions, right? But and I think the sooner you start developing them, the sooner you see yourself in a clearer light as an individual who has, this is mine, okay? This stamp collection is mine. This is what I'm doing. And I'm doing it for me because I love the colors of the stamps and the shapes. And I love learning about the different countries. And, it doesn't matter what it is, and it doesn't have to grow into,
a moneymaker
a podcast or a book
exactly.
or a lecture tour. It doesn't have to grow into something. It can just be yours, right?
It's so true. And then if somebody is still stumped, I'll say something like, well, imagine you were on a desert island. What would you be thinking about?
Yeah.
The one thing that always comes up for me is if I'm on a desert island, I do think about this a lot. I would miss big band music. I would be thinking about Frank Sinatra and Mel Torme. And I'm passionate. I am very proud of my old school CD collection. My kids are always like, why aren't you streaming, Mom? Why aren't you streaming? Well, I like to see the liner notes. I like to see who else was in the band when that was recorded. Like, I want a little bit more context.
Well, it's a story, right? It becomes a story, not just a piece of music to listen to. It becomes a story. And I think in a way, when you exercise your passions, that becomes a story. And it becomes in part the story of you, right?
Yes, and it's a way that you can become interesting because you
Yeah.
are interesting, but we
Yeah.
usually dismiss the minutia that we're excited about. Usually,
Well, last night we were at a housewarming with new friends. There are always new people moving into San Miguel, especially now when things in the United States are difficult. And this woman brought out this amazing sculpture that she just made from Amazon boxes. So she orders things from Amazon and she thought, what am I going to do with all these boxes? This is such a waste. So she made a Virgin Mary out of Amazon boxes and stuffing. And I have to say, it was stunning.
now, would she have said that she's passionate about paper sculpture?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow,
yeah. I mean, it's just, the bits and pieces of your happiness are everywhere around you.
they really are. Like I've definitely started probably the last no, I remember the first time I went crazy for birds. It was in the early 80s. And I got a new camera that was a Russian brand of a SLR camera, Zenit. And I have
Yeah.
this one photography friend who always brings that up in conversation because he was with me when we went to this secondhand store. Well, anyway, taking pictures of the birds and watching them in my solar powered bird bath when the weather's good, right out of this window, brings me such joy. And I'll never forget a couple years ago, a pileated woodpecker finally came into the backyard.
Oh my goodness, they're so gorgeous.
I screamed like
Yeah.
a bear came into my backyard. I just screamed, pileated woodpecker! And my three sons and my husband was home and they're like, what are you talking about? Pileated woodpecker, get to the window. But
And I've been a lifelong bird watcher. And my last book, Woman Watching, was all about birds, and this amazing woman in Northern Ontario
oh, wow.
who studied birds, all by herself in a log cabin in the middle of the woods for 50 years. Um, but birds are a great passion because they are infinitely variable. You can watch them no matter where you are, in the middle of the city, in the country, in any country that you care to visit. It kind of scratches that collector itch, because,
Yeah.
I've seen 325 species now. But the beauty of birds is ever changing, and birds migrate, so their presence in your world changes. Their colors, like the American goldfinch, the colors change from winter to summer. I mean, the variety is just endless, and insects are the same. I've started to become really interested in insects, because we have some very unusual ones here in Mexico.
Wow.
But yeah. I mean, I think we made the point. It can be anything, right? It can be anything. But the point is, you do need a passion. Beth, all the way through this book, and this book is written in little wee bits as at like conversations, so you can kind of read as much as you want. It's not big chunky chapters. But she talks a lot about, it doesn't matter what the passion is, so long as you have one.
Exactly. Now, speaking of the book, you are a writer. Tell us a little bit about how you got the idea to write a book with Beth, about Beth. Tell me what that process was like.
Well, I don't plan any of my books. I think this is my 20th or 21st book. I don't plan them. They come to me, and the only thing I've learned in 40 years as a writer is to recognize them when they come.
Right.
And when they're saying, "Hey, write about me," I say, "Oh, okay." But this book, so we were walking for a while and talking, and as a writer, I always make notes about everything. So I was making notes. Beth is a writer too. She just published her third book. And so she was making notes, and at some point, I don't know when it was, if it was 6 months in or a year in, we said to each other, this should be a book, and for her, she wanted it to be a book because she wanted people to have something to hang on to. to help them through that transition from the working world to the world of your own life, which can last now 30 years easily, right? And so it's no small thing. For me, I wanted people to know Beth. Beth is such an inspiration in my life, and she's such a model of a satisfying and successful way to move through those latter decades that I wanted other people to know her. So we kind of had our different motivations, but they were sort of the same. So we started being more rigorous about collecting our notes on various conversations. I started organizing the notes. So I have this great notebook. It's a miracle bind notebook where it's a spiral bind. You can take the pages out and then put them in somewhere else, which I love. And so I started organizing the notes by topics. And after 3 years, I had 4 notebooks, and she had several. And I said, I think it's time. So I brought the notebooks all here to Mexico, and I started on October the 5th to write the book, and I finished on March the 15th. And because, a lot of these little pieces were already semi-written, right? So it was very fast. I sent it to my agent on March the 15th. On March the 16th, I was in a car accident and broke my back. So it was such good timing. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was, and then of course there was, once Random House bought it, there was an editing process, etc. But it was a joy to write. And the only tricky part was, the pieces some pieces are as small as a couple hundred words. I think the longest one is 1,500 words. I think 5 pages is the longest chapter. But the order of them was tricky. And so what I did was I printed each of them out separately, and I threw them out on the floor, and I walked among them, and I just used sort of a, I don't know, it was sort of an organic method. I just looked down and read, I could read the first sentence or so of each one as I walked around. I thought, okay, you first. And then you. Maybe you then, and you. And that's how I just gathered them together. And once I had a sort of a rough order, then I sent that to Beth, and she read it and made comments. And she ended up reading it 3 times, I think. I mean, she was very much a part of the process. We talked about anything that she, didn't think belonged, or that she was sensitive about, or, we were very respectful of each other.
That sounds like the process you're describing sounds like her collage direction to you.
That's right. It was very collage-like. And when you read the book, you can kind of get that sense. People have told me that reading the book, that the book actually mirrors the process of walking and talking. And I mean, that I didn't have that in my mind when I was doing it, but I can see how that's the case. Yeah.
And as soon as you just said that, I had a quick image in my mind of how much I love walking and talking with girlfriends. And it's just a beautiful thing. I don't know that men do it as much as women, but women, we crave it. We do it a lot.
Well, yeah, and women talk a lot to each other. Storytelling is a big part of women's lives. I think it could possibly be genetic, because women were traditionally around the fire with the kids and cooking the food, and the women were communal. Men were out, stalking the saber-toothed tiger, and you can't really talk when you're on a hunt, right? Silence was important. So I think there's something deeply, deeply embedded in us. Not that all women are like that, or all men are like that.
No, of course not.
But I think there's there's something deep in our long history that that pulls women together.
Yeah. Yeah,
Conversation.
definitely.
Yeah.
Now, before, of course, I don't want to forget, but how can we get the book, Walking with Beth, Conversations with My 100-Year-Old Friend?
Yes, well, you can buy it from your local independent bookstore if you're in Canada. It's not as available as a paper book in the United States, but it is now available on both Amazon.ca and Amazon.com.
Oh, amazing.
And you can also write to my publisher. If you go to my website, MerilynSimons.com, the only trick is to spell it correctly. It's MER and SIMONDS. If you go to my website, there are links to the various American and Canadian booksellers.
Absolutely. That's great. Also, I'm going to have everything in the show notes, so it'll be easy to
Oh,
find.
great.
Did Beth share with you any wisdom that you found surprising?
That's a really good question. Let me think about that for a minute. I feel like I was constantly surprised by her. But sharing things that were surprising. Yes, I guess. So Beth and I are both atheists. And at one point we started talking about being Christians. And I was really surprised that at one point in her life, I think it was kind of in her mid 40s, she turned her creative energies towards the church and bringing art into the liturgy of the United Church in Canada. So that's the United Church for Americans is a combination of the Methodist and Presbyterian. And I found that quite surprising. I said, well, why not like open a women's shelter, or why not go into the schools or senior centers or something? But um, she felt that congregations in churches had become quite kind of rigid, and this was in the late 60s, and so she would be in her late 40s, and so she thought there was real potential, and so she created an arts committee within the church, and they hung art exhibits like paintings. They had writers come in. They had dancers come in and be part of the liturgy. They caused a great deal of controversy at one time by bringing in a sculpture of kind of a female Christ figure and put it at the front of the church, a naked, I should say, female Christ figure. So as extremely polite as she is, which is very much a part of the culture she grew up in the 20s and the early 30s, she also has this incredible rebellious streak, but it's not really rebellion. She has this strength that allows her to go places that she thinks society should be encouraged to go. Right? Yeah. So that was very surprising to me, because I left the church and I left it for good, where she didn't. She left and she came back and did all this amazingly good stuff.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And actually, she was part of they made these beautiful embroidered banners that they hung in the church, that were very 60s, very modern art, and they're still there and they're just exquisite.
Wow. I'm sure I'm making an assumption, but it sounds like it's hard to imagine the last few years without her.
Yeah. That's, she's not going to live forever. I don't want her to have to live forever. Life is getting more and more difficult. Although she's 105, she's still living in her own home. She has some people come in now and then to help her, but she doesn't have anybody living there with her. And that's certainly the way she wants it to be until the end. And I really hope for that for her. It's not going to last forever. None of us are.
No, we aren't. But
You know,
I just can't even imagine though, like you guys coming together in a more intense and regular way
yeah,
have produced such magic, personal magic, a book that
yeah,
can help other people. And
yeah.
if you wouldn't have recognized that you needed a little bit more support, it wouldn't have looked the same.
No, that's absolutely true. I think that's one of the things about being a writer that has been um that has leaked into my regular life, which is you learn as a writer, the only thing you learn really is to trust your gut. And so, when a sentence doesn't feel right, you learn to go back to it. When you feel stuck in the middle of a manuscript, in the middle of a novel, you learn to keep going because you know that's the only way through it. You trust your gut. And so I think that's one skill I have developed, and that a lot of people haven't, right? Especially if you've been working outside the home your whole life and working, in kind of a regulated job where you have certain rules and regulations around what you do, and you do that, and you do it well. But it doesn't give you the experience in listening to who you are inside. And Beth is really big on that. There's a story in the book so she worked until she was 99, and she worked with PTSD veterans up at the military base in Kingston, and she had these guys who were all suffering from PTSD, sitting around a table with some crayons and a piece of paper, and she had them choose a color and make a mark, just one mark. And then she asked them, are you happy with that mark? Is that enough of a mark? Do you want to make two marks? Do you want to add a color? What do you want to do? And they learned how to connect with that inner self that was in so much pain. It's quite a phenomenal thing. And I think, that you're doing that kind of work with people yourself, right? Getting people to listen to themselves. And, Beth caught me up several times where she said, is that really what you want to say? And I learned more from her about stopping and listening. I do too much. I get sick because I do too much. Listen to yourself. Stop. Somebody asks you to go for a coffee. Take a minute. Do you want to go for a coffee? Is this the right time for you? And listen to what's right for you. And women being largely givers, we have a harder time with that, I think.
Very much so. And that's such powerful advice to come out from different angles, from you personally, from Beth. And just pausing and checking in with yourself and getting better at catching those thoughts, that you're allowed to catch a thought, that you can get better at catching a thought, that it's wise to catch a thought.
And what Beth says is that she said the answer is all inside you if you'll just listen. You have a lifetime of experience, positive and negative, and if you stop and listen, your body will be able to tell you, how to proceed. And, it's not an easy thing for us Norte-Americanos especially to do, right? And I think it's a trick, but it's a trick we really all have to learn.
So right. And there's so many parts to it, having the belief that it's okay to put yourself first and have that pause, and that it's worthy to find your thoughts. And then the skill of slowing down, quieting down to notice thoughts. There's different parts to it, but nobody's going to do it for you.
No. And the thing is, nobody has the answer for you.
I know.
And what I find as we get older is that even people who've known me forever will come out with things that I think, that's not me. Right. So this is only stuff, this is you for you. And it's just such a great place to get to. And I think it's one of the real pleasures of growing older is that you do learn more who you are and what you like and know how to make yourself happy. And that's just a pretty great thing.
Oh, Marilyn, it is. That's a great place to stop too. So that's huge. Like that's a mic drop. That
Yeah.
could change your life for sure. And I wanted to say, this I did have a guest who was 99, and she her name was Elaine Lillane, Jack Lillane's wife. And she was still fit, and she was promoting a book that she co-wrote about his legacy. So I'll put those in the show notes too, the information there, because I'm fascinated with people that are growing that old and still contributing and interested in contributing and able to contribute at such a high level. It really, we need to see more of this. We
I
need to
think
see
so.
more of what's possible.
Yes, and we need to maybe stop watching so much on screen because the images we have of older people are really self-defeating. And the other thing we need to do is to watch our own language.
Yes.
It's a lot like feminism in the 60s and 70s where we learn not to, denigrate ourselves. And it's the same thing now. A woman I spoke to, she said, last week I gave my husband a 70th birthday party that said, "Happy birthday, you old fart." He said, "I'm not going to do that anymore." And I think that's important. I think we have to see ourselves as vibrant and with a lot to give because we do.
Yeah. And there's some times ahead that are going to be difficult, but
Yeah.
it's not like a but, it's an and
Yeah.
there's still so much possibility. I think
right.
that's really the breakthrough that's helping me understand things at a deeper level and be able to open up possibility to help other people think about what's possible, to open that door just a little bit more.
Right.
Merilyn, thank you so much. What a delight it's been today. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you and hearing your story about your experience in your relationship with Beth. Thank you so much for sharing such a personal part of your life that was so powerful with all of us.
Well, thank you, Susie.
Okay, that's it for this episode. There was so much about this episode that surprised and delighted me. First of all, I was surprised to learn about what's possible in life even when you're over 100. I also loved that what inspired the Walk and Talk playdates. It was Marilyn's milestone 70th birthday. That's when she knew she needed a trusted, experienced friend to help support her through it all. That reminded me of having my first baby and the way I sought out information from experienced, trusted friends to help get me through it prepared. Women play such important roles in our lives, especially during transitions like these. Merilyn really does believe that becoming more prepared about aging gives you more strength to cope. And I want to repeat something she said at the end of her interview, that one of the real pleasures of growing older is that you do learn more about who you are and what you like and know how to make yourself happy. And that's a pretty great thing. I couldn't agree more. It's a pretty great thing to grow forward this way. Now go hug a girlfriend. They are the best. As always, thank you so much for listening to the Women in the Middle show. Please remember to share it with your friends and other midlife gals that you know would get a lot out of it. Being the queen of your brain domain really is the best way to be. It's time to stop waiting for the right moment and start creating the happiness, excitement, joy, and fulfillment that you crave. Remember, if you need coaching support for the changes you're excited to make in midlife, I am here for you, and I offer group and private coaching. As well, I offer a private 50-minute conversation to help you get clear on what you want now. So go ahead and book your next chapter clarity session at www.talktosusie.com. For show notes and links, go to www.susierosenstein.com and click on the podcast tab and look for episode 455. And you'll also see a link there for my other show, The Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, which is all about the reality of running your business when you're a midlife gal. It's also on iTunes, Spotify, and all the podcast places. Let's do this, ladies. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.